When thinking of the Pacific Northwest and the ecology that makes it what it is, you probably think of a few key things: the Puget Sound, evergreen trees, and salmon. However, there's another component that's just as important, and you may have never even heard of this fish: the Pacific lamprey. They have outlived nearly every other species of fish, dating back almost 400 million years ago. They've survived ice ages, meteors, mass extinctions, and the entire human existence as we know it. And yet, they are largely unchanged from their primitive state. They have thrived in the high-energy waters and waterfalls throughout the Columbia River Basin for millions of years, the natural origin habitat supporting their ecological needs. They greatly support salmon populations as they act as an important prey buffer, often being consumed by the same predators that hunt salmon and sustaining their population. For centuries, indigenous populations around the Columbia River Basin have harvested and heavily protected this eel-like fish. Prized for feasts, medicinal purposes, and often served at the forefront alongside salmon, the lamprey has been regarded as a really special fish. Lamprey have a huge cultural importance but are largely overlooked by many conservation communities. As hydroelectric dams and general industrialization take over, populations become more and more threatened to an endangered level of concern. It's time to reconsider how we direct conservation, especially concerning our use of hydroelectric dams. Since time immemorial, tribes have utilized lamprey as a first food. First foods are those believed to be specially given to the people by the Creator to sustain them. Lamprey are especially sustainable due to their dense fat and caloric content. Other important first foods include salmon, large game such as deer and elk, huckleberries, cherries, and more. Annual harvests of lamprey were heavily celebrated throughout communities and continue today. As first foods have a special value to Indigenous people, they typically have more tradition, preparation, and celebration. This especially includes the harvest. Older and more skilled and agile folks would climb the dangerous scaffolding lining waterfalls, while children gathered from the calmer pools at the base. This was a family practice and was especially encouraged to be passed down to the next generation in communities like the Nez Perce, Umatilla, and Yakima tribes. After harvesting, lamprey are immediately culled and dissected in preparation for cooking. Fillets are stick roasted over a fire with tins to collect the dripping oil. This oil would be used for a variety of purposes, from cooking, lighting lamps, to hair grease, and even medicinal uses, treating conditions like earaches, skin problems, and more. When cooked, fillets would often be served at special celebrations and events, especially annual harvest celebrations of the lamprey themselves. Lamprey are highly esteemed and respected in many tribal communities across the Palouse and beyond. Tribes surrounding the Columbia River Basin, especially around Willamette Falls, have special regards for this species. Willamette Falls is known as a last stronghold for populations in the Pacific Northwest. Only here can they be harvested. Positioned near Portland and the Pacific Ocean, there are no dams between the ocean and the falls, which greatly supports habitat needed for lamprey to thrive. Because of this support, cultures here are more able to continue more representation, appreciation, and conservation for this important source. Unfortunately, this isn't the case for populations further down the Columbia River. Elders in communities like the Nez Perce worry on an annual basis of whether they will even be available at their harvest celebrations. Tribes that value the lamprey the most appear to be the most acutely aware of the problems they face and have the most action to conserve them. Programs like the Tribal Pacific Lamprey Restoration Plan of Columbia River Basin works to open mainstem and tributary passages for lamprey to migrate, to improve habitat conditions, and monitor data on water contaminants and quality. They also work on public outreach and education. Lamprey often have a negative or under-respected reputation, and programs like this work to bring awareness of their importance. The Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative also promotes implementation of conservation regulations and policies specifically in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California. They also partner with various natural resource agencies and tribes to reduce threats to lamprey and improve their populations. Many tribes around the Columbia River also work independently to restore lamprey communities. The Umatilla tribe evaluates restoration efforts. The Yakima tribe manages harvest levels throughout their land. The Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon tracks escapement estimates at Willamette Falls, seeing where young lamprey migrate, as well as conditions in the lower Deschutes River, 15 Mile Creek, and Hood River subbasins. The Nez Perce tribe works specifically to prevent the loss of pheromone migration cues. Lamprey, like salmon and other species, use pheromones and their sense of smell to direct migration. However, this can get redirected, especially in hatchery fish, and can lead to lower populations of adults that survive. The Nez Perce also work to maintain populations in the Snake River Basin by restoring ecosystem values to promote biodiversity, productivity in species, and general ecosystem health. This is done through translocation of species, first raised in hatchery locations and released when old enough. This works to increase larval abundance, juvenile outmigration, and regional adult abundance. Of course, cultural and social impacts are just as important. Keeping the spirit of the lamprey and the traditions behind it alive are a large goal of the Nez Perce tribe. However, not everyone believes in the spirit of the lamprey. Despite the importance lamprey have to the ecosystem and especially indigenous populations, European American settlers have historically regarded the lamprey as a trash fish due to their parasitic tendencies on more flashy sport fish. Programs on television like River Monsters, Vampire of the Deep, or Animal Planet's Blood Lake, Attack of the Killer Lamprey, and more perpetuate this distaste for this rather unfortunate-looking animal. Additionally, incredibly invasive species of sea lamprey found in the Great Lakes often get confused with the Pacific lamprey, which is deemed endangered. These factors play a part in a social misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge about the species, leading to less conservation urgency. Lamprey require additional human attention and care to thrive. Much like the salmon, lamprey life cycles require very specific conditions to survive, such as pristine, high-energy waters and a place to migrate. As humans have industrialized the environment, less have been able to survive. At Bonneville Dam in the 1960s, there were as many as 400,000 adults recorded. By 2010, that count was down to an estimate of 22 to 36,000. Communities have worked to advocate for and conserve the species, but more needs to be done. How is it that a species that has survived nearly 400 million years on this earth can be taken out by less than a century of human damage? Something isn't right. Scientific communities and the public need to pay more attention to Pacific lamprey. Therefore, increased conservation and awareness is necessary for this remarkable species to continue. Hydroelectric dams are a critical component in the population decline. Fish ladders and dams are not made for the lamprey's specific way of swimming. The smooth vertical surface works well for migrating salmon, but not lamprey. A study conducted in 2019 by NOAA's Northwest Fisheries Science Center found that out of 314 Bonneville Dam lamprey, 57.6% made it past the first dam. However, only 5.1% of those 314 made it through the next 3 dams, almost 146 miles upstream where they need to migrate to. Improvements in available cleaning surfaces, slower water flow, and additional openings were recommended edits to existing fish ladders available at dams. Whether efforts are concentrated in cultural awareness and practice or biological adaptations to existing structures, improvements must be made in our society to accommodate the Pacific lamprey to continue as a species.